Mrs. Gale, why does your face look like that?
Well, I've just gone to your laptop trolley just to see what's behind it, and I pulled out this. And I'm just quite curious want to know really, Miss Mia, why have you got a picture of Mrs. Lockie imbued and Mr. James on Sports Day with a mic and all these mouths? You need to explain yourself.
Well, before I explain myself, can you explain what's happened to Miss Lockie in this image?
This was taken imbued, and it was pouring with rain. She was pretty dishevelled by the end of it. But you're going to have to do a bit of explaining here, Miss Mia. What are you doing
so
with
a
this?
few years back, I had a child in class, and she was very much into children sharing their voices. And props that she used, and also the microphone there is related to people sharing, and then the mouths are also related to people talking about their thoughts. So it's a people voice.
That's good to know. Teacher voice?
No, people voice. No one wants to hear from you, Mrs. Gale.
Could it be a teacher voice?
No.
I think it probably could be on our next video input.
Let's go on with the lesson.
Okay, let's go.
Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to English.
Woohoo!
Mrs. Gale has had too much sugar today.
Oh, I've got so much energy.
So much energy.
Yep.
Right, welcome back. It's Miss Mia and
Mrs. Gale.
and hopefully she can control herself today.
Sorry.
And we are just going to crack on with some more English. So hopefully you've been all getting on with the Macbeth at home and you're enjoying the text. So let's carry on with the lesson.
Let's go.
So it's our last session on determiners, Mrs. Gale. Do you
Okay.
remember them? Come on, let's go.
Right, 4 types of determiners. Here we go. Before I mention them, can you remember them at home? So if you can pause the video, can you remember the 4 different types? We'll be doing them as starters each day. So, the 4 different types are articles, quantifiers, demonstratives, and possessive.
You're still doing a really weird order.
I like my order.
We've got articles. Do you remember the articles?
A and the.
Or the
A
and. Thank you. Demonstrative.
Demonstrative would be demonstrating, and there's the 4 different types, all beginning with T.
Well done. What are they?
These, that, those, them.
This, that, those, these. Do you want to do that again, Mrs. Gale?
This, that, those, these. I was just getting too excited.
The next one we looked at yesterday, possessive determiners. Why are they easy to remember? Because they are the same as...
Possessive pronouns.
Do you remember any?
Yep. Mine, ours, theirs, yours.
Okay, good. And the last one are quantifiers. And hopefully you can see in the word quantifiers, you can see the word quantity. Have a think. What does the word quantity mean? What does the word quantity mean, Mrs. Gale?
So if you're looking at a quantity of something, you're looking at the amount of something.
Bingo. Stop there. Right. These are types of terms that tell you how many or the amount of a noun within a sentence. So we'll look at some examples below. So let's have a look. We can have 1 apple. We can have several books.
There is only a few stickers left. 2 boys.
Can I have some juice?
And many children.
So all these words in blue are telling you about the number or the amount of nouns there are within that sentence, and is specifying the amount or the number. So if you look at, can I have some juice? You don't want the whole carton of juice. That's not what it's asking for. You just want a tiny bit from that particular carton, okay? So quantifiers are really important in identifying and really highlighting the amount you want or the amount of a noun. Okay? Right. Do you get that?
Yep.
Good. So, here we've got 5 sentences, and I'd like you to do the following. Identify the quantifier or quantifiers in the sentences below. So we've got 5 sentences here. Pause the video and have a look. Remember, quantifiers are not just numbers, they're not just 1, 2, 3, 4. There are other quantifiers that are few, some, many. They are all quantifiers too. So have a pause, and if you need to go back to the previous screen, jot down some of the quantifiers and see if you can see them in the sentence. So pause the video, have a go. Right, Mrs. Gale, you're looking rather shady. Are you ready?
No, I'm just having a look to see whether there's any sentences with two quantifiers in them. I don't think there is.
Well, shall we work through them and
Yeah,
see?
because you said quantifiers, so I was just wondering whether there was 2. Were you trying to catch us out?
Maybe.
Who
Who
knows?
knows what was going through my mind? Right, number 1, Mrs. Gale. Macbeth asked for 2 murderers.
Yeah, sometimes with the quantifiers...
I've given you the pen already.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes with the quantifiers, I find it really easy to look for the numbers first, and that's what I'm doing. So Macbeth asked for 2 murderers, so there's your quantifier.
Smooth.
2 murderers. 2
And
would be
remember,
quantified.
the quantifier comes before the noun. So if you're not sure, remember to identify the nouns in the sentence and just see, is there a word before it that tells you about the amount or how many? Okay?
That's a really good tip, and actually I can use that tip for the next one here. So I'm just going to highlight in green where my nouns are. Lady Macbeth, there's no quantity about Lady Macbeth. Sleep is the noun. There may well be a quantity there, and commotion is an event. Okay, so I'm having a look before the word sleep. Yes, it tells me the amount of something. They're getting some sleep. So therefore, the quantifier in this sentence that I'm going to do in red is going to be some.
Good.
Okay, that's a really good tip, Miss Mia.
Thank you. So the number 3, we've got a few people gathered outside the king's chambers. So
Miss Mia, what are chambers?
room. So like a bedroom.
Thank you, Miss Mia.
Sorry.
So this would be, the quantifier would be few.
Okay, cool. So here we've got some men decided to meet in the courtyard without Macbeth.
Okay, how many men? It's some, and actually the quantifiers can be used to start a sentence, so some.
Okay. And then Banquo was several minutes late to the feast.
So several implies it's more than one, so yes, it's several minutes. It does several, doesn't mean 7. I know that some people think that because they can see the term 7 in there. I definitely don't think that, so I don't know why she's doing that. So several just means more than one, okay?
And you're absolutely right, Mrs. Gale. I wrote quantifiers just to mislead you. So hopefully, on purpose. So hopefully you were not fooled by that and actually managed to identify. Stop nodding your head like that.
I'm just shaking my head like that. I'll never fall.
So do not be fooled by it, okay? And that's really important. Right, let's move on. So we have got 2 SATs questions based on determiners. Remember, determiners is the umbrella term, and there are 4 different types of determiners. And they may come up as those specific keywords, or they might just call them determiners as the umbrella term, okay? So you need to know the meanings of both. So we've got circle the 3 determiners in the sentence below. So we've got 3 here to circle.
And you have to really use your knowledge on all of the different types of determiners for this question, because you can't just presume that it's just going to be quantifiers.
Or articles, or demonstrative, or possessive. So it might be a combination of all of them. So we got William didn't have any cereal in the house, so he went out to buy some cornflakes. Now remember, determiners always come before a
Noun.
Always come before a
Noun.
So a
Noun.
Good. So the first thing we're going to do, Mrs. Gale, is actually underline the nouns. What do you think?
Yeah, good idea.
Right. So William is a noun, is a proper noun. Can you find any others?
Yep. Cereal.
Yep.
House.
Yep.
Cornflakes.
Good. Right, so we are now going to look before the nouns to see if there are any determiners. So I'm going to read the sentence, Mrs. Gale, and you're going to tell me. Are you ready?
Are you going to circle it?
I'm absolutely going to circle it because that's what it says here.
Good.
So William didn't have any cereal. Do you see a determiner there?
Yes, any.
And what kind of determiner is that?
Quantifier, because it's an amount.
Brilliant. We've got, so William didn't have any cereal in the house.
Stop. So house, the. The is an article. Remember the a an, or a and the? The is the article.
And so he went out to buy some cornflakes.
Okay, so the determiner would be some, and the type of determiner, it would be a quantifier, because it's the amount of something. So in this particular example, you've got 2 quantifier determiners and an article.
Good, and as you can see, underlining the nouns actually help, because you can see how the determiners always come before a noun, so that's a really good top tip. Right, the next one. Remember to pause your video after each question is read. Circle all the determiners in the sentence below. Now, this is different to the first one because here it tells you how many there are. Here, you know there's more than one, but it doesn't specifically tell you how many there are, so you really need to read the sentence carefully. So pause the video here and have a little think. Right, Mrs. Gale, we're going to use that same strategy. I'm going to underline the nouns first, and then we'll circle the determiners. So can you tell me one of the nouns in the sentence?
Apple trees.
Okay. Any other?
Yep. Windows.
Okay.
Side.
Great. So if we have a look then, let's see if we can identify any of the determiners because they always come before a
Noun. Now just before we go there, some of you might have just identified apple, but actually the noun is apple trees. They're telling the type of tree, so just be careful with that.
Okay. So we've got 2 apple trees.
I think it's quite easy to spot that first one because you can see the quantifier. It's the amount of something, which is 2.
Well done, Mrs. Go. You're getting much better at this. So 2 apple trees screened the open windows on one side.
Yeah, now initially I would have looked at windows. Open isn't a type of determiner. They're just telling you information about the windows. They were open windows.
So what kind of word class is it?
Open windows. So 2 apple trees screened the open windows.
It's an adjective, boys and girls. It's describing the window. It's open.
Yeah, okay.
Come on, Mrs. Gale. Right, so
Too long to
what
stop
is
down.
the determiner?
The.
Good.
It's article.
And then the last one.
I think that's quite simple. Their side. 1. The amount of something 1.
So hopefully, boys and girls, you have got those correct, and we can move on. Okay, so the LO is the following. LO. To identify and use main and subordinate clauses. Woo! Right, so let's crack on with the learning. So when we write, we use main clauses and subordinate clauses to structure our ideas and thoughts, don't we, Mrs. Gale?
All the time.
All the time. So here's an example of a main clause. I've colour-coded it, so it's green, and a subordinate clause from the book, and it's blue. Mrs. Gale likes a bit of colour coordination, don't you?
I do.
Okay, so main clause. Lady Macbeth also heard the bell toll. So what does a main clause have to contain, Mrs.
A
Gale?
main clause must contain 2 aspects. It must contain a subject and a verb.
No
And
one wants
if
to
we
see
have
that
a look
again,
at that,
Mrs. Gale.
subject and a verb.
Right.
And if we have a look here, Lady Macbeth also heard the bell toll. The subject is Lady Macbeth.
So a subject is who or what the sentence is about, okay?
That's the subject. And the verb, so a verb is an action word in this particular instance. We'll just have a different coloured pen so we can identify it, is heard. Okay, there's your verb. So therefore it is a main clause because it contains a subject and a verb.
Thank you, Mrs. Gale. Great clarification there.
Thank you.
Oh, grabbed my hand there. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Have a look at the subordinate clause. Let's just have a read of it then. So there was blood on his face and hands as he carried 2 daggers. Now, Mrs. Gale, what part in that sentence makes it a subordinate clause? Can you remind me?
Yep, well a subordinate clause needs to contain a subordinating conjunction. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for that subordinating conjunction.
And it also must contain a main clause. So a subordinate clause is attached to a main clause. It requires a main clause for it to make sense.
Okay, so the
Do you
main...
want to underline the main clause first?
That's what I was just about to do.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Gale.
Why are you just interrupting me all the time?
All the time.
Jeez. So the main clause here, actually I might do it in green because your
Oh,
writing was in green. I
gosh.
like a bit of colour coordinating, you know I do. Okay, so the main clause is, there was blood on his face and hands. Now it's really important to notify that and, in this instant, isn't the subordinating conjunction you're looking at. Some of you might think, oh, there's a conjunction there, but it's just face and hands.
It's a
okay?
coordinating conjunction joining a word to the main clause.
So there's your main clause. And Miss Mia, just to identify the main clause, it contains what?
A subject and a verb.
Okay, so in this instant, where's the subject and the verb?
So the subject would be blood because that's what the sentence is about, and was would be the verb.
Yeah.
You're trying to catch me out, weren't you, Mrs. Gale?
So just reiterate that verb isn't always an action word here. So in this part here, it was an action word here. In this part here, the verb is here. Okay, which is was.
And you should all know this anyway from passive verbs and so on. You know, was is a verb, were is a verb, is a verb.
So therefore, the subordinate clause, the subordinate conjunction is here, as, when you think of that ice or a wobub, that's the as. And the clause is, as he carried 2 daggers. Okay, so that's your subordinate clause.
If we got rid of the subordinate clause, we'd be left with the main clause, which makes sense on its own. Right, so hopefully that clarifies things for you.
Also, if I read that subordinate clause on its own, it doesn't make sense. Okay?
Doesn't make sense.
So if I said, as he carried 2 daggers, you don't understand the phrase. Okay?
Okay, so all clauses, we've already mentioned this, must contain a subject and a verb. So a subject is who or what the sentence is about, and a verb is an action word. And did you also know that was, be, and is are also verbs? We should already know this from before. So, oh, sorry, Mrs. Go. Still getting used to this situation. So main clause, all sentences that make sense on its own. So Macbeth stood still. Macbeth is a subject. Stood is a verb. Macbeth stood still makes sense on its own. And the subordinate clause here, a clause that often begins with a subordinating conjunction but needs a main clause in order for it to make sense. So Lady Macbeth came back with stained hands while holding the candle. So that element here, while holding the candle, is a subordinate clause. Okay? So, Mrs. Gale's already mentioned this, and if you watched the previous lesson, you should already know and be familiar with these conjunctions that we're going to be talking about. So, Mrs. Gale, I'm going to say the conjunction, and you're going to say it after me. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. If. Since. Be a bit more enthusiastic.
Since.
As. When. Although. While. After. Before. Until. And because. And what is that little phrase that you say to remember it?
I saw a wobber.
And your action is?
I saw a wobber.
Mine is I saw a wobber. Okay. So let's move on. Is it a main clause or is it a subordinate clause? So here you've got 5 sentences in total. You need to pause the video here and have a read of each of the sentences and decide, is it a main clause? Does it make sense on its own? Or is it a subordinate clause? Does it contain a subordinating conjunction? Okay, so have a go, have a think, pause the video here, and then Mrs. Gale, are you ready to do the honours?
Yes, I am.
Right, do you want to choose your colour? Right, main or subordinate? First one, I'll read the sentence. Rumours flew through the castle.
Main clause.
Good, we can't see a subordinate conjunction there at all. While guests gathered, Malcolm and Donald Bain were convinced that Macbeth was the murderer.
Subordinate clause, here it is.
Oh, yeah, just about to ask
While
you.
guests gathered, there is your subordinating conjunction. And don't forget, on its own, doesn't make grammatical sense.
Okay. Duncan's sons fled the scene of the crime.
That is a main clause.
Good. Macbeth was crowned king.
A main clause.
And then a dark plan formed in Macbeth's mind as he was still wary of the witch's prophecies.
That is a subordinate clause, here it is. As he was still wary of the witch's prophecies.
And if you're wary about something, that just means you're aware. You're still not quite sure about it, and you're still a bit suspicious.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're unsure.
All right, shall we move on? Well done, Mrs. Gale.
Thank you.
So here we've got 2 questions related to main and subordinate clauses, and we would like you to have a go. I'm going to read you the first question and then press pause and decide what kind of clause is it. So it says, what kind of clause is underlined in the sentence below? If they could afford to, the ancient Romans ate well. So what is this? What kind of clause could it be? Is it a main clause or is it a subordinate clause? You could also have a relative clause, but remember a relative clause must begin with a relative pronoun. So Mrs. Gale, if they could afford to, what do you think?
Well, I'm looking for those words, and I'm looking for a subordinating conjunction, which I can see, which is if. Okay, so therefore, because it contains a subordinating conjunction, it is going to be a subordinate clause.
Right, let's have a look at another one. Right, here, this is an interesting question. Mrs. Gale loves these questions, don't you, Mrs. Gale?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. I like these ones.
I was being serious, boys and girls, she does. So label each of the clauses in the sentence below as either main, so a main clause, or a subordinate clause, so either M or S. And I'm going to read it to you first, and then you're going to pause the video. When the bell rang, we dashed into the playground, and we started a game of football. So we've got 3 separate clauses here. You need to decide, is this main or subordinate? Is this main or subordinate? Is this main or subordinate? Pause the video here and have a go. Mrs. Gale, are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Here you go.
Okay, so you just put an M here or S for subordinate. And do notice here that they have not identified the conjunction and. That's not been identified in what they've underlined here. So, when the bell rang, that is going to be a subordinate clause. And the reason why is because you've got your subordinating conjunction here. Also, when the bell rang doesn't grammatically make sense on its own.
1 out of 3 so far.
Okay, we dashed into the playground. That is a main clause there. We dashed into the playground. That makes grammatical sense on its own. And also, when we look at the subject and the subject is we and the verb is dashed. Okay, so therefore it does make grammatical sense. Now, some of you might look at this and think, oh, well, the subject is bell and the rang is the verb, but it also contains a subordinating conjunction. So be really wary of that. And the last one here, we started a game of football. That is a main clause. Okay. Again, we've got the subject, which is we, and the verb, which is started. Okay. So it's subject, main.
Okay, thank you very much. Well done, Mrs. Gale, 3 for 3. So let's move on. What I'm going to do now is just talk to you about the task then that you're expected to do today associated to this lesson. Remember, all of the resources are online on the school website, so please do go online and download the slides so you can review it and the work as well, okay? So, for bronze, it's quite simply the following. Look at the table and read each sentence carefully. A part of the sentence has been underlined, so you can see that in each of them, a part of the sentence has been underlined. You must decide if it's a main clause or a subordinate clause. So, Miss Gale, what's the main clause again?
Must contain a subject and a verb.
And a subordinate clause?
It contains a subordinate in conjunction.
Good, and it doesn't make sense on its own. So you've got a few sentences here to look through, and you need to decide whether it's main or subordinate. Okay? The next one. For silver, you need to do the following. Write out and underline the main and subordinate clause in each sentence below. So you need to have 2 coloured pencils. You need to write out the sentence. You have to underline the main clause in one colour and the subordinate clause in another colour, and create a key so you know, and whoever's looking at your work afterwards knows exactly what you have colour coded. Okay? So again, you've got 5 sentences here. And then gold is the following. Add a subordinate clause to each main clause and try and use conjunctions to extend each sentence. So here you've been given a main clause, so there are 5 different main clauses. All you have to do is add a subordinate clause to each one, and you can extend and up-level the sentences as you want to.
Miss Samir, at this point here, could you have a subordinate clause at the beginning?
Absolutely, you can have a subordinate clause at the beginning, you can have it at the end.
Okay.
You can actually have a subordinate clause in the middle of a sentence, because a relative clause is also a subordinate clause because it doesn't make sense on its own.
Thank you, Miss Smith.
No worries. So what we'll do, we are going to go for the answers for this together, but we won't go for silver, but then gold is completely up to you.
Yeah.
So pause the video now and have a go at those activities, and then we'll go through the answers for bronze and silver. Okay? Right. Bronze. Mrs. Gale, do you want to do all of these?
Yeah.
All right. Go for it.
So, first one here is Macbeth stood where he was. That is a main clause.
Good.
The second one here, after a short period of time, is a subordinate clause. That word after creates a subordinate clause. The second one, the third one, until they confess to the murder, is a subordinate clause. The next one here, he turned away, is a main clause. Glamis Castle was woken, is a main clause. And then the last one here, I can see that term because, which makes it a subordinate clause.
Okay, so those are the answers that you should have had. Okay. And then for silver, we will have red for the subordinate clause, and we'll choose, what colour, Mrs. Gale?
Let's go blue.
Blue for the main clause. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to underline all the main clauses first, and then Mrs. Gale's going to do all the subordinate clauses. And then it's easier for us. Right, so Malcolm and Donna Bain were convinced that Macbeth was a murderer. I know that this is the main clause because the next part starts with however, which is a subordinating conjunction. Next sentence, even though they knew they would look guilty. So here we've got a fronted subordinate clause. We've got even though as a subordinating conjunction.
And just fronted means it's just at the front of the beginning of the sentence.
And you must have a comma to separate the fronted subordinate clause from the main clause. So that's the main clause there. Macbeth was crowned as the new king as the crowd. Okay, there you go. And then the next one, Macbeth's secret dream had come true. And then as daylight broke, there you go.
Now, Miss May, I've got a bone to pick with you. No, they're all correct. They're all absolutely correct. However, number 3...
I'm not prepared for this bone, but we'll see how it goes.
Number 3 has the conjunction as here and here. So why did you underline this part of the main clause?
So Macbeth was crowned as the new king because that's a ceremony, and I was just telling you that he's becoming the new king. And then this part here is giving you extra information about how the crowd reacted to that particular news.
And a conjunction joins 2 parts of a sentence together, don't forget. So as, in this part here, isn't joining the parts of the sentence together. It's this one here that creates that separate entity.
Thank you, Miss. Do you want to just go, I've chosen the red pen. Do you want to just underline all of the subordinate clauses?
How long did not dare accuse him? There is a subordinate conjunction.
You might want to circle the subordinating conjunction.
Yeah, or it can also be called a contrasting conjunction. It's a conjunction that creates that subordinate clause. Even though they knew they would look guilty, there is your subordinating conjunction. Macbeth was crowned as the new king, as the crowd clapped in admiration of their new leader. There is your subordinating conjunction as Macbeth's secret dream has come true since the encounter at the heath. Since. And as daylight broke, there is your subordinate conjunction at the beginning there. So therefore, that's how it would look.
So this is your mark scheme for, well, you've looked at bronze, this is your silver, and then obviously gold is completely up to you because you have that creativity and that time to do what you need to do. Right, so hopefully, boys and girls, you have a clear understanding now of main and subordinate clauses. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you guys soon. Right,
Bye.
bye.